Hey everyone, welcome to the investor.bet AFL Finals week number 1, and I'm going to go through an early look at all 4 games coming up in week 1 of the finals. With no games on this weekend, I thought let's jump ahead, go through the games. I want to give you a behind the scenes look at the factors and research, key performance indicators for all these sides, so you can really start thinking about what bets that you want to make. And then closer to game time, once lineups are out, I'll post another video where we'll analyze the player props a bit deeper, go through disposals, goal scorers, and decide on my favorite bets for each one of these games. So this video is going to really help you with analyzing games, the key factors to look for, not only for the rest of this season, but years and years to come. And also, these are using the Bet Finder tools, which you can view for yourself through the link in the description. This is how I've gone through and analyzed games for the past 10 years now. I've been doing it full time for a little bit longer, but it's been 10 years since building these tools. And this year I made it available for everybody to use as part of investor.bet. So really exciting weekend of games coming up. Like all 4 finals are really, really good games. Like this is a bit of a weird year just in general in the AFL. Like there's no real super standout 1, 2, or 3 sides. Like of the sides in the top 8, genuinely there's 6 to 7 sides who are completely capable of winning the premiership if everything goes right. And that's not what we've seen in previous seasons. Really, at this stage, already been narrowed down to, 2 sides where you're expecting like one of those 2 sides will win and that'll be it. But it's wide open this year, which also leaves plenty of opportunity for us betting into these games as well. So before we run through each of these games, I just want to quickly recap what happened in the final round. It was an interesting round overall in general, came down to the wire. Fremantle needed to win to secure their spot in the top 8 after Carlton lost the game earlier that afternoon. However, they weren't able to do so. So Carlton were able to sneak in. From a betting perspective, if you watched last week's video, then you would have made a stack of money across these games. We pretty much, of the 9 games, only got 1 of them wrong. In the Melbourne-Collingwood game on Friday night, we had Collingwood. Also, that game went under the total points line. We had Hawthorn to win that game, win it comfortably, and also to go over the total. We also hit disposal players in that game with a number of Hawks players racking up high numbers. Similar story in the Geelong game, beating West Coast by a big margin. Then we targeted quarter 2 in the Gold Coast Suns Richmond game, and you'll notice here that in the second quarter, at quarter time, Gold Coast were only leading by 3 points. Then by halftime, they were leading by 32 points. So outscored Richmond 41-12 during that second quarter. Then also in the later games, we had the Brisbane Lions, and we targeted the first quarter and first half. Brisbane followed their similar pattern, got out to a big lead, made sure they won the game, at least this time around after dropping the 2 prior. But Essendon were able to close the gap, which has been that consistent trend all season with the Brisbane Lions. Then the Crows team total to go over 75.5 in a high-scoring game against the Swans. And then on Sunday afternoon, the only game we got wrong, I thought this was going to be a slightly closer game between the Bulldogs and Giants. Still lent towards the Dogs winning, but thought the Giants could keep it under a 4-goal margin. However, they couldn't get that done down in Victoria. Then either side to win by 1-24 in the Carlton St Kilda game, and liked Port Adelaide in the last game, and also either side to win by 1-24. For the betting results and overall betting trends for this round, 5 of the 9 games went under. If you're keeping track of this, which I do with the betting guides, which are also a tool part of the bet finders. There's a week for the favorites. They won 8 of the 9 games. Port Adelaide was the only underdog to win their game outright. Favorites covered the spread in 6 of the 9 games. This season's been a year for the underdogs, covering 110-97. The underdogs who covered this week, though, were Essendon covered the spread against the Brisbane Lions. Then Carlton covered the spread as an underdog against St Kilda, and Port Adelaide winning outright there against Fremantle covered the small plus that they had. Now, looking ahead to this weekend's games, the Thursday game, Port Adelaide versus Geelong, qualifying final, 2nd versus 3rd. So the loser of this game gets the second chance. The winner goes through to the prelim. Similar story with 1st versus 4th. The Swans versus GWS played at the SCG on Saturday afternoon. The other 2 games on Friday night. The Bulldogs, Hawthorn at the MCG, and the Lions, Carlton at the Gabba in Brisbane are both elimination games. So we're going to run through them. I'm going to go through my thoughts, who I think is going to win and why, and what I'm currently looking at betting at this very early stage. We're over a week out. But this is how you want to approach it when you're betting. You want to do your research early so you already know what you're thinking. Don't leave your decisions to the last minute and then still expect yourself to make good decisions. So looking at this game, Port Adelaide are favourites. They're minus 10.5. A bit more money has come for them. They've shortened into $1.48 from that $1.54 that went up early. And we have a total at 163.5. Port Adelaide won the meeting earlier this season in round 9 at GMHBA Stadium. Bring up the recap of that game to actually see what happened. It was back in round 9, and you may remember this game. Port Adelaide got out to a 49-point lead midway through the second quarter, and then Geelong will slowly work their way back to close the margin all the way to 6 points by full time. So Port Adelaide definitely took their foot off the gas there after getting out to a big lead. They ended up scoring 101 points, 15 goals, 11. Geelong, 14 goals, 11 on 95 points. So that was their last meeting. The line for that game was Geelong minus 23.5 at home. So we've gone from the Cats being a 4-goal favorite to right now, as I'm looking at it, a 2-goal underdog. So 6-goal turnaround in the spread there. They obviously lost that game. If we go back to the last meeting at the Adelaide Oval, which was round 14, 2023, Port Adelaide were 9.5-point favourites for that game. So very similar to what they are here, and they won 110-72. This is a very, very interesting game. Both sides come into this in really good form. Port Adelaide have won 6 straight, and then the Cats have won 4 of their past 5. The only loss against St Kilda, 107-89. The teams have split the past 10 meetings, 5 wins apiece, but Port Adelaide have covered the spread in the past 3. Interesting as well, 3 of the past 4 head-to-head have been decided by 12 or less, which is exactly what the line is currently sitting at. As it currently stands, I'm leaning towards Port Adelaide winning this game for a couple of reasons. I think playing at the Adelaide Oval is a massive advantage for them. They've won their past 4 at the venue, including an 112-point win against the Swans there recently. They're 9-4 at home this season. Geelong, playing at this venue, have won 4 of their past 5. 2 of them were against Port, and they split those games 1 win apiece. Obviously, these are the 2 games that I'm referring to right there in 2022 and 2023. Looking at the stats for both sides, Geelong currently the 3rd best attacking side, averaging 94 points a game. Port Adelaide slightly behind, ranked 8th overall. And defensively, Port Adelaide clearly better, 3rd ranked in points conceded, whereas Geelong ranked 11th in this category. How I think this game is going to play out, Port Adelaide just need to take advantage of their chances, make use of their chances. They're going to get plenty of them. They generate a high number of inside 50s, and Geelong concede a high number, or at least an above average number of inside 50s. And if we go through and look at the efficiency ratings for the opponent, goals per inside 50 for the opponents against Geelong, they're ranked at 9th in that number. So the key area and key concern, obviously, for Port Adelaide is, can they kick straight? They generate the 2nd most shots on goal, and at home, they average 8 more scoring shots than they do on the road. So that's a big advantage for them. Whereas Geelong only averaged 21 scoring shots in away games compared to 26 at home. However, Port Adelaide's accuracy is worst in the league. If they kick straight, Port Adelaide are going to win this game. The only way they're going to lose is if they miss their chances, or going the opposite way, Geelong are extremely efficient. And that is possible. They're coming off a 168-point game last start, which they were very efficient. Jeremy Cameron kicked 9 goals in that game. But I think Port Adelaide are going to dominate possession in this game. They can see the least number of uncontested possessions to the opposition, and overall least number of disposals and least number of marks. Now, looking at Geelong, They generate the third least number of uncontested possessions. They're ranked 12th in disposals and ranked 13th in marks. So they're going to have to be extremely efficient with the ball. And if we look at disposals per goal, Geelong ranks second in this category. However, Port Adelaide are pretty good at stopping sides and making them use more of the ball to generate goals. That's going to be an issue for the Cats. Now, Geelong are pretty experienced. Like, you don't have to go back that far, and there was massive questions being raised about Port Adelaide, but I do think they win this game. I'll also be looking at their players for disposals, which we're going to get into in next week's video once lineups are out and we have the betting odds available to look at those matches. But I think that is how this game is going to be played. Also, if we go back to 2021 in the qualifying final, these sides met. It was at the Adelaide Oval and Port won 86-43. The only concern I have is obviously their recent matchups have been close. 3 of the past 4 decided by 12 points or less. We had a 6-point game, a 12-point game. Port Adelaide won that one comfortably, and then they lost by 12 in this game. But I think at home, they should be able to win this game. Also, don't mind the total to go over. It's only at 163.5. Both these sides capable of scoring plenty of points. Geelong's defense isn't that strong, and 163.5 is a fairly low number. I'd lean probably slightly more to Port team total to go over if I had to pick a side. But also don't mind the full game total to go over as well. On Friday night, we have the first of the elimination finals between the Western Bulldogs and Hawthorn. The Bulldogs are small favourites for this game, $1.82. They're 2.5-point favourites on the line, and the total is 165.5. This is a really, really good game, and honestly, one that could go either way, and it's going to be really important to break this down and see where the edges are for both sides. Both of them come into this game in really, really good form. Port Adelaide have won 6 of their past 7, only dropping a game against Adelaide. I went back through and looked at that game to see what kind of happened there. Why did Western Bulldogs lose a game which they should have won comfortably? And it was largely due to the fact they kicked terribly inaccurate, and the Crows were very accurate in front of goal. And sometimes, that's all it takes to win a game against any opposition. Hawthorn, on the other hand, have won 13 of their past 16 leading into this game, and really probably should have won 15 of the 16. 2 games they dropped against GWS and Port Adelaide were in winnable positions in both of those games in the fourth quarter. And then they had a bad performance in round 17 against the Cats at GMHBA Stadium. Outside of that, they've been very, very good. 170 points last week against North Melbourne, 131 the week prior, 112 prior to that against Carlton. So in attack, they're performing really, really well, which this leads me to where I feel like this game is going to be decided. Now, Hawthorn are currently the ranked 6th attacking side overall in the season. However, they're clearly the best over the past 2 months. They go against what are now the best defensive side in the competition in the Western Bulldogs, only conceding 75.5 points per game on average. Recently, the Bulldogs only conceded 61 against GWS, 42 against North Melbourne. They did concede 111 against the Crows. So if teams can kick straight against them, they're able to break through. Outside of that, 59 against Melbourne, 48 against the Swans, and 48 against Geelong. So that's a bit of an overlook over their past 6 weeks. But the numbers don't lie. They concede the least number of shots on goal. Now, the question you have to ask yourself is, can Hawthorn take advantage of that like they've been doing against a lot of other teams during the second half of the season? I do believe they can. I think Hawthorn can run up a score. I think this game being played at the MCG is a huge advantage for them. It's kind of no wonder the Western Bulldogs had an issue with it and wanted this game being played at Marvel Stadium. However, when they played early this season, Hawthorn won that game at Marvel, which we'll get to in a second. But the Western Bulldogs have lost 4 of their past 6 at the MCG. That's over the past 3 years. They play there twice per season. They're 1-1 this season, but haven't played there since round 10, where they beat Richmond by 91 points. And then their other game there this year was against Melbourne back in round 2, where they lost by 45. Hawthorn at the MCG have won their past 5, all of them by 27 points or more. And those wins include against Richmond 2 times, Collingwood, Carlton, and Adelaide Crows. So that venue definitely favors Hawthorn. And you can kind of understand why the AFL wanted the game being played at the MCG. due to the fact that it sold out in the first few hours, like all the games did, but obviously holds a much bigger capacity than Marvel Stadium. So yeah, overall this game, Bulldogs top 2 attacking side, number 1 defensive side, but the way Hawthorn are playing, they can break through that, similar to the way that the Crows did. And if, the Bulldogs are inaccurate, which they're ranked 14th in that category this season, and teams against Hawthorn, are fairly inaccurate as well, kind of does set it up for, a very, very close game. And I do think there is a bit of value with the Hawks here as an underdog. I think this game should be closer to a pick'em, so $1.90 either side. So at Hawthorn, at over even money, they won that last matchup 98-91, which was round 8 this season. They had 28 scoring shots to the Bulldogs, 21 in that game. Bulldogs got out to an early lead. They led by almost 20 points after kicking the first 3 goals, had an 18-point lead. Hawthorn built it back to even at quarter time and then got a lead during the second quarter, maintained that. Bulldogs got back in front midway through the fourth, and then Hawthorn edged them out with a couple of late goals to win the game. One other thing you want to look at is what happened, who contributed to that. You notice Treloar, leading disposal getter, who kicked the goals, for example, for both sides, and just seeing which players were involved in that performance. Did any key players have bad games? For Hawthorn, there are a couple of players who, have been performing better recently than they did back in that game. So overall, to sum this game up, it's just a matter of whether the Hawks attack can break through the Bulldogs defense, which I do believe it can. And also, I do have belief that the Hawthorn defense should be able to slow down this Bulldogs attack compared to how other sides have been doing so recently. The other question, obviously, Bulldogs are the more experienced side. They average 108.9 games of experience compared to Hawthorn's at 89.8. So one of the more inexperienced sides in the league, which does set them up well, for the seasons to come. But I do give them a real chance of getting over the line here in the opening elimination final against the Bulldogs. Next qualifying final on Saturday afternoon, the Sydney Swans take on GWS. So battle of the 2 Sydney sides. Obviously, winner progresses to a prelim final. Loser of this game will go through to play the winner of the elimination final. Swans, small favorites here, which I think they're deserving to be. I think the bookies have kind of nailed this line. Had the number at -8.5. They've put up -7.5. And the Swans are currently paying $1.62 to win this game outright, and the total at 172.5. Now, Sydney have won the past 3, and they've covered the spread in each of those against GWS. 2 games this season, Sydney won by 27 and then 29 points for both of those games. They were 16.5-point favorites back in round 15. The gap between these sides has definitely closed. It's obviously been well publicized. Swans had a bit of a rough patch where they only won 1 game of 6 weeks, and that was against North Melbourne. They have got back to some sort of form the past 3, winning each of those 3 games. However, they've all been against bottom half of the table sides. So none of the sides that beaten Adelaide, Essendon, and Collingwood have made the top 8, and that sometimes just, isn't as strong a form as beating the better sides in the league. So definitely give GWS a chance here. They've won 7 of their past 8, dropping their game last week against the Western Bulldogs down in Victoria. Think this could be a very, very close game. I don't think there's a great deal between these 2 sides. I'd lean towards the Swans to be winning, but I don't rule GWS out at all. Interestingly, the team listed as the away side has covered 14 of the past 18 in this matchup. And I think what this game does come down to is, can Sydney's defense hold up against GWS? I think that's been the main issue with the Swans. Their defensive numbers have dropped. So attack-wise, they've stayed at the number 1 side virtually all year. But defensively, they were, for a period of time, the number 1 defensive side. However, have now dropped down to the 7th ranked side in points conceded. So they're very even defensively, but the edge there is with the Swans, hence why they are a favourite. This game also being played at the SCG. Sydney have won 3 of their past 4 at this venue. They're 9-2 at the SCG this season, and only really had one poor performance, which was against the Western Bulldogs in round 21, where they lost that game 87 points to 48. GWS have lost 2 of their past 3 at the SCG, and the one win they had was in 2023, which was by 1 point. They did win an elimination final here in 2018, so you're going a fair way back, 6 years back for that. However, in those situations, it is important to see how teams have performed in finals at different venues. Should mention the Geelong Port Adelaide game. They met in a 2021 qualifying final at the Adelaide Oval, which Port Adelaide won 86-43. Now, coming back to the Sydney GWS game, looking at how these teams have performed overall statistically wise this season, I would be looking into some GWS player props as well. They're ranked 2nd in disposals, 4th in uncontested and contested possessions. And the Swans are ranked 9th in opponent disposals and 8th in opponent uncontested possessions. So GWS should be able to capitalize on that. Whether their efficiency numbers are strong enough to be winning this game. One thing that I pay close attention to is efficiency ratings, and you'll notice defensively, opponent scoring shots per inside 50, there's virtually nothing between these two sides. However, Sydney are ranked first in scoring shots per inside 50, where GWS are ranked 11th in this category. So GWS are going to really need to capitalize on their chances that they do get and actually convert those scoring shots into goals, which they are pretty good at, but they will need to kick accurately. If GWS are missing chances, it's going to be very difficult for them to win this game just in general. The other thing to pay close attention to for this game, and why I also do think it's going to be close, I feel like this is going to be a game where GWS is going to be in the running early, and then Swans may just edge them out over the second half. Sydney, even though they finished on top of the ladder, were one of the worst first quarter sides in the league. They ranked 12th overall in quarter 1 win percentage, and they conceded the 2nd most points in first quarters. So that's an area they have definitely struggled with, is getting out of the gates this season, whereas GWS are pretty solid. They're not amazing, but they're a pretty solid first quarter side. Whereas Sydney, from that point forward, are near the best in the league. So key for GWS is a strong start. If they're down by 2 or 3 goals at quarter time, then Sydney are going to win this game and win it comfortably. So that's an interesting way that you can look at approaching this game as well. Potentially live betting the Sydney Swans if you like them, or taking GWS to win the first quarter as an underdog. That's also highlighted if we look at their matchups this season. So firstly, the latest matchup, which was round 15. This was at GWS home venue. You'll notice here was very, very close at quarter time, only 3 points between the two sides. Then Sydney ran away with the game during the second quarter, predominantly and early in the third. Then GWS edged back late. And then the other matchup that they had earlier this season in round 8. This one, GWS were leading by 15 points at quarter time before the Swans got on top and ran out winners 98 points to 69. So that has consistently held up, not just in the Swans games in general, but also against GWS. Then the final game of the first week of finals, the other elimination game between the Brisbane Lions and Carlton, being played at the Gabba. Brisbane -20.5. So not all that different to when they met in the opening round, where Brisbane -23.5. Carlton won that game by 1 point, and the total at 165.5. So 5 points lower than it was when they met last time. And just in general, the totals for finals games are put up slightly lower than they are for regular season games, as they're generally more defensive focused games. Now, this matchup, 6 of the past 9 head-to-head have gone under, but I do have a slight lean towards the overs in this game. But to be honest, I'm not making any final decisions on this matchup until team lineups are announced. This is going to be really key for Carlton. They're obviously going to bring in as many players as they possibly can who are fit enough to play, but I don't think it's going to be enough. Brisbane should be winning this game, especially at home. They have won 7 of the past 8 this season at the Gabba. They have a 7-4 season record there. However, lost their first 3 games against Carlton, Collingwood, and Geelong. Carlton at the Gabba did win that game at the beginning of the year, but have lost 10 of their past 12 at the Gabba going back to 2013. Obviously won that most recent. Interestingly as well, looking at that, only 2 of those losses of the 10 losses were by 40 or more points. So majority of them have been fairly close, and kind of similar to the Sydney Swans, Brisbane are the opposite. They're strong starters and poor finishes, and that started, in the opening round against Carlton. We'll bring up that game. So back in the opening round, Carlton won 86 points to 85. Brisbane had 25 scoring shots to Carlton's 21. And if we look at the timeline here, Brisbane, midway through the second quarter, had a 46-point lead, and then Carlton were able to get back in front on the back of, we'll quickly count them, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 straight goals, got back the lead. The game stayed very even and very low scoring from that point forward, and Carlton running out winners thanks to a late goal from Harry Mackay to win that game by 1 point. That'll obviously be in the back of the mind, a little bit off the Brisbane players, but I do think they get over the line here. The key with Brisbane is playing the 4 quarters. If we look at their stats this season, they really have a tendency of showing up early. They're the number 1 first quarter side, 5th best second quarter side. But from there, it starts to kind of go downhill. Their points scored in the 3rd quarter, ranked 14th in that category. Thankfully, they perform well defensively. However, in 4th quarters, they're ranked 11th and 14th. Now, if you look at Carlton, they go from one of the worst second quarter sides to a bit better in the 3rd to a top 4 4th quarter side. So I feel like the kind of timeline of this game is Brisbane are going to get out of the blocks. They're going to have a big lead, and then whether Carlton can run them down, which I don't think they're going to be able to do. But we've seen recently, if you look through Brisbane's record, they could have easily not lost a game. They could be 12-0 since their bye. So they lost to Hawthorn in round 11, and then from that point have won 10 of their next 12 games. However, they lost against GWS and lost against Collingwood. And if you look at the timeline for both of those games, they really shouldn't have lost. They had, they had winnable leads in both games well into the second half, but managed to lose them. So can Carlton overrun them? I don't think they can, but Brisbane have consistently made a habit of getting out to leads and not playing out 4 quarters. Can they do that in finals? If they do that beyond this week, they're going to get eliminated. They need to put 4 quarters together to be winning. Other factors for this game, if we go through, Brisbane are a really good defensive side, and that's where the key difference between these 2 sides are. Brisbane ranks 2nd in points conceded and give up the 2nd least inside 50s to the opponent, whereas Carlton's defense ranked 14th in points conceded and conceded the 11th most inside 50s, whereas Brisbane should be controlling the ball a lot down their end of the field, get plenty of shots on goal, and just need to be accurate with those shots, and they'll win this game comfortably. For Carlton, looking at their efficiency ratings from an attacking perspective, they do generate the most goals per inside 50, so they are the most efficient side in the league. Brisbane do need to be able to stop that to make sure they win this game. And they are ranked 12th in opponent goals per inside 50, so it is a little area of concern for them. So I do think Brisbane win this game. I think they win by between the 20 and 30 points. I do think this is another game where the line is pretty much spot on. Brisbane should run out winners. I'd be targeting them early in the game with your bets. Wait for lineups though, as that's going to be the most crucial factor. So that's how I'm looking at playing the games for the first week of the finals. I like Port Adelaide to beat Geelong. Also interested in the overs. Like Hawthorn as an underdog against the Western Bulldogs. Somewhat interested in the overs, but I think both sides defensively are very good. But I think the Hawks can break down the Bulldogs' defense. Sydney versus GWS. I think the Swans win that game, but I think it's a good game for a try bet either side, 1-24. And Brisbane versus Carlton. Brisbane should run over the top of Carlton and look to back them early in that game, as I think they'll come out strong in that first quarter and first half, like we've had really good success at backing them to do this season. So thanks guys for watching. Make sure you're subscribed, have notifications on so you don't miss the follow-up video to this break down these games a little bit further. We'll go through player props once lineups are out, disposals, goal scorers, all that stuff, and go through some other bets for these games. So thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you guys soon.